Good morning, Denise Dryden here. I'm out on Bainbridge Island. It's sprinkling, so I'm out underneath the magnificent cedar tree here, sitting in its shade and keeping protected by the branches. It's fabulous. So I wanted to talk today about how to release old rigid forms in our lives. And I'm going to take you on a little trip, and we're just going to sort of look at thoughts and forms and where they come from and how they show up in parenting. This is kind of the thing I do. So I work with young adults who are in self-discovery, trying to figure out what they want to do with the rest of their life, how to break away from some of the parent expectations. And then I also coach parents who have adolescents, especially adolescents in therapeutic boarding schools because of anxiety or school failure, or just really super intelligent kids who just don't like the public education track or the pressure. So this is what I do. And what we want to do today is talk about what happens when our children or our life is asking us to break out of some of the old conditioning and become more flexible and fluid and creative, right? We've talked about this in past videos, but this is something I want to keep putting my hand on and reminding each of us that we're at a really interesting time. We're developing a new future. We're kind of like looking at what is it going to take to step into this Aquarian energy, this energy of being the water carrier, the fluid carrier, and creating life in a different form. So it means that we have to dismantle some of these calcified structures and institutions. We have to let go of what used to work, because it did work. It worked really, really well. It worked well for the baby boomers like me. It worked well for the Generation Xers, and it's not working anymore. So it's time to sort of loosen that up and advocate for these creative kids that are asking us for something different. So here's an example that I want to use. I didn't do a video last week because I was in San Jose at the memorial for my mother. My mother passed at 86. She was born in 1932. She was born and lived in the Great Depression. The Great Depression went from 29 to 41, and it didn't stop until the United States and Canada, basically all of the Western world, turned into a war machine. She lived through World War II, 1941 to 1945. It was all about troops going off, home support, rationing, and sort of hunkering down and waiting to get through the war. She also lived through that whole post-World War II boom where people are getting cars and refrigerators and houses and telephones and TVs, you know, all of that. And I think the most outstanding thing that I can say is that my mother was part of, and we were all as children, but my mother and my father were part of the ground level building of Silicon Valley. So they saw the computer industry coming, and they moved to San Jose, and they started all of that. So what we have is this mentality in those that are 80 and older, those who are the grandparents, who are the parents of us, who survived in a depression, who understand the value of a good job and work, because the unemployment rate during the depression was 23 to 24%. And that's extremely difficult to survive. Families were placing children out of their homes because they couldn't afford to feed them. They didn't have work. So what happens is that the values of that generation are about getting a good job. Get a good job. In order to get a good job, you need a good education. In order to have a good education, you have to save for college. And you have to get your kids ready for college with good grades. So this whole thing was like, don't ever let that happen. Those people who had good jobs and good educations mostly survived during the Depression. So the baby boomers were trained in this, hook, line, and sinker. You get your kids through high school, and you get your kids into college. Then they can get a good job, then they can buy a house, then they can get married, you know, all of that stuff. And the Generation Xers, they picked up on this like they've done with technology, like they've done with everything, and they went uber at it. like they were the ones who managed their kids. They were the ones who sort of cleared the way. We talk about helicopter, we talk about snowplow, we talk about the curling mom who's sweeping the area out in front. You know, and these are the parents who intervened. They talked to teachers, they talked to coaches, they had tutors, they had SAT prep, they've had college counselors. And we have kids who are being sent, pushed, directed towards college. And they're filling out applications for 3 to 10 colleges and saying, I hope I get into one of those. Or I don't know which one I love the most. Or maybe I do, but I'm not really prepared for that. It's really an interesting dynamic to have all of this pressure on continued education and not a lot of specific direction as to why. So here's where it gets fun. I'm going to now lay in this concept that we value intelligence. We value the brain. We value thought. What we have is a population of overeducated, intelligent, book-smart kids with no skills to live. We've talked about this in previous videos. Thought became the most primary thing to train. So Einstein sort of talks about how form follows thought. That what we think we bring into matter in front of us, and matter clumps together into form. So we create forms in front of us based on our thoughts. So Descartes was a philosopher in the 1600s, and he said, the deal is, if you're capable of thinking, you're capable of creating. You're capable of being present. I think, therefore I am. So when we become thought-oriented and our thoughts become rigid, and it's like, this is what I know, this is what I know, this is what I know. We send all the form builders after it inside our head. We send all of the energy towards creating that form, and then that form becomes solid. And what we're looking at now is 2,000 years of thoughts that have been anchored and held, and anchored and held, and anchored and held in place that no longer serve us. It's okay to have form-following thought, of course. However, if it's unconscious thought, if we're not aware of where it comes from, what was driving it, what made that a reality for us. So, you know, whether it's our perspectives, our fears, our beliefs, our impulses, our reactions. In the case of the example I used about my mother growing up in the Great Depression and World War II, if you're not conscious that those stories, those fears are playing at all times, then it becomes sort of irresponsible form creating or irresponsible form holding based on old standards, not off of what wants to happen, what's new. So if form follows thought, then it becomes rigid, and our form builders are holding something in place that's no longer useful. So how do we get rid of some of this rigidity, and how do we release this? So I came up with a list of 3 things and then a recommendation. So the first thing is to get curious about your belief systems. Where do they come from? Are they even yours? Are they passed on from your parents? Are they passed on from your grandparents? Are they yours to impose on another? For example, this idea that you need a good job, and you need a good job so that you could pay these bills because there's fear from the Depression. Watch where that generational line comes from. Number 2, to let go of timelines. You know, this whole K through 12 college, job, marriage, allow the world to reform, to form in a different manner. What if only those people go to college that really know what they need to do, what they want to do, and that we start honoring gap years or gap decades or, you know, whatever it takes for our kids to figure out how to separate from our agendas and give them some freedom to decide who they are and what they want. Number 3, listen, really listen to your inner thoughts. Observe your relationships. Where are these thoughts and these beliefs showing up in your relationship, and where's their tension and rigidity and pressures? So I'm working with 3 families right now who have 16.5 to 17-year-old kids who have demonstrated enormous intelligence, creativity, fluidity. They're brilliant little crystal kids, right? And we have parents who want to see the beauty of that crystalline kid, that beauty of that fluidity. And all they can think of is, yeah, but this is their junior year. This is when the grades count. I need their GPA up. I need them to be thinking about colleges. I need them to be filling out SATs. And what we have is teens imploding under the pressure of trying to hold a rigid form in place. This is why we're talking about this. So one of the tools that has worked for me and continues to work when I lay it into the coaching is Byron Katie's work called The Work, which is literally 4 questions. Whenever you catch yourself, you go, is this true? Is this actually true? What I'm saying, what I believe in, what I'm acting on, is it true? Or is it something I thought was true? Number 2, can you absolutely know it's true? How can you absolutely know that if your kid doesn't go to college at 18, that they're going to be living on the streets or living on your sofa, watching video games and smoking weed all day? That's your fear talking. Do you actually know that that's true? Number 3, how do you react? What happens when you believe that thought? What do you look like? What do you feel like? Where is your reaction? Are you a hard ass? Are you mean? Are you arguing? Are the parents arguing with each other? Are you having a tense, non-loving relationship with your teen? And is it all about your expectation for college? This is where the shit gets real, right? What do your relationships really look like in the house? And where did that come from? Number 4, who would you be without those thoughts? Byron Katie does a brilliant job with these questions. These are not easy questions. And if you really are serious about breaking apart rigid forms, these questions are really good tools to do that. Who would you be without these thoughts? What would it look like? What would the world look like? So we are in tremendous times of change. Now is the time to step back and observe, to watch, to notice, to loosen up our grip on what we thought was important. What if it doesn't matter? What if your kid takes 4 years off, decides that they're brilliant, and pays their own way through school and is a straight A student? Wouldn't that be fabulous? Then it isn't even your agenda. How do you stretch and bend and swirl and move around with your life and come at it from a different perspective? And then, more than anything, how do you allow curiosity and creativity to come in? So these are the kind of things I do. We come up with what's really where the rub is, where the tension is, and then we start to loosen it up and unwind it, and then come at it from a different perspective. If this is something you're interested in doing, give me a call. You can find my number, my email, my contact information on DeniseDrydenCoaching.com. Today's the last day of September. It's fall. It's beautiful. Get out there and play. Enjoy.